Do you have a fly box that's stuffed with go-to patterns for your local creek? And do you have another one that's full of all the patterns you need to fish that tailwater that you only visit once or twice a year? Now, let's be honest for a sec. When's the last time you used every single one of those patterns? How many of them are really just there for emotional support? And how often do you think, man, these are just weighing my pack down and making it tough for me to find the fly that I actually want? I actually think that the secret to a good fly box isn't just tons of variety. Instead, it's about hitting every life cycle stage of those major aquatic insects. Your stoneflies, your caddis, your mayflies, and your midges. A few imitations of each of those are about all I ever reach for in 90% of trout fishing situations. So today on Untangled, I'll share more about this approach to picking flies and putting a box together so that you can hit the water without hauling an entire fly shop with you.
This is Untangled, fly fishing for everyone, presented by Ventures Fly Co.
Hey everybody, welcome to it. This is Untangled, and I am your host, Spencer Durant. Happy to be here, just like I am every week. And we got to chat a little bit about a topic that really wasn't high on my radar until we started doing this show. Because over the years that we've been doing this, and it still feels weird to say that we've been doing this show for years, because it really honestly feels like, I don't know, it feels like I just started it yesterday. It does not feel like it's been, like 3.5 years now or whatever. Anyways, over the years, as we've been doing this show, we have gotten a lot of questions, some variation of, well, what's the best way to set up or organize my fly boxes? Should I organize them by the type of water that I'm fishing, like tailwaters or spring creeks or freestones, or should I organize them by the species of aquatic insect that they represent, or do I organize them by size or color or whatever? And specifically that idea of organizing them by what kind of river you're going to fish, whether it's a tailwater, a spring creek, or a freestone, which for those who don't know, that's just different types of rivers out there. Not every river is the same. So your freestones are fed primarily by snow and rain. Your spring creeks are fed by springs coming up from under the ground. And then your tailwaters are the rivers that come out from beneath the dam. And there's nothing wrong with that approach of setting up a box that's, okay, this is my tailwater box, this is my spring creek box, and this is my freestone box. But I also don't think that that's necessarily the most effective way to put a fly box together, because I went down that rabbit hole myself when I was really getting into this. And what ended up happening is I would put the box together and it'd be like a quarter full just with the flies that I had on hand. And then I would either go buy or tie a bajillion flies to fill the space, because an empty fly box gives me anxiety. Feels like, no, I don't have enough flies. I'm not going to catch anything. And then you go to the river and you fish a parachute Adams and a zebra midge all day and fine. But it would really happen like that, though, where I would go and stock these boxes with flies that just never got used, honestly, unless I was just pulling a bunch of flies out of the box and trying to throw something at the wall to see what sticks on those really tough days. And on top of that, on top of all these flies that I very rarely used, I also had all these boxes that I needed to not forget when I was loading the car up for a trip. Or I eventually just went into just shoving them all in my pack and just saying, all right, I'm going to carry them all with me so I never forget them. And then it gets really annoying how big and heavy your pack gets. And then it's tough to find the exact fly that you're looking for, because then you've got to dig through all these boxes and try and remember, all right, where is exactly that missing link that I put in here 2 months ago when I built this box out? And I think what I really... So those are some of the big drawbacks of this approach of building a box out based on the type of water that you're going to go fish. Again, nothing wrong with it, but I think there's ways to be more effective and more intentional with it. And what I think really, I shouldn't say like, oh, it bugs me, because that makes it sound like I'm pissed about it. I'm not. But what I think I dislike about that approach of just having tons of flies and then feeling like, all right, I've got 1,000 flies with me today. I'm going to be fine. I'm covered. I'm good to go. It doesn't feel as intentional. Like I'm applying my abilities as an angler to the situation that's there in front of me. Because there have been days, some of them very recently, where I have been extremely lucky to catch any fish at all, instead of catching fish because I was actually doing all the right things. I was actually engaged and paying attention. Okay, just to give you an example. A few weeks ago, I'm on my way down to Utah to go meet up with Alex, my business partner here at VFC, and the rest of the crew. We're going to get some work done. And I stopped to fish. And I'm down there just I had a royal flush on with a Frenchie underneath it. And I was just drifting it through these little pockets. And it was one of those drifts where nothing had happened for like 5-10 minutes. And something on the bank caught my attention. And because I'm easily distracted, which I'm sure surprises longtime listeners of this show, I looked over at the bank, and then I looked up at the sky, and then I looked up at the mountains. I thought, oh, it's really pretty today. And then I tried to find my fly, and I couldn't see it anywhere. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. Where'd my fly go? And then I feel this tug. And I'm like, I should probably set the hook. So I set the hook, and sure enough, it was like a 19-inch brown. Completely by luck. I didn't feel like I'd earned that fish. It was 100% luck, no skill involved in catching that trout because I wasn't paying attention to anything that was going on, and he hooked himself. Okay. And I will say that being lucky is definitely better than being good, but I do like to feel like I earned that fish. I want to feel like I have done what I needed to do as an angler, that I have closed the gap between me and the fish, that I have successfully imitated nature in a way that the fish believes my fly is real and either doesn't notice that I'm there or doesn't care that I'm there. That's that feeling that I'm personally chasing when I'm going out and trying to catch a fish on a fly rod. So when I catch fish like that, where it was all luck, I don't feel like I earned it, right? I don't want to say, oh yeah, I caught this fish. Yeah, well, yeah, I caught it, but I didn't do anything to earn it. And that's what really made me make the move from that standpoint of just stock the boxes, as many flies as I can, to being more intentional with what flies I carry with me, because I want to be intentional about every part of this process. I want to be involved. I want to be using my skills, and we'll say my skills, right? I'm a middling caster at best. I'm probably an average angler at best. I don't fish with a whole lot of people, so I don't know where to compare myself to. I do a lot of fishing solo, but I'm not sitting here saying, well, my skills, they are impeccable. And, if you ever come down to my estate in Canterbury, you might be able to see just how incredible they are as we fish for stock trout on my mowed lawns. No, that's not. I'm just, I want to use what skills and knowledge I currently have, and I want to use those to the best of my abilities, whatever level those may be, to catch the fish, doing everything I can to actually make it fair chase. I think that's the other way of thinking about it. And so that's what's really made me move from all the flies to being much more intentional about my fly selection. Okay. One other pro towards this as well is when I've narrowed down my fly selection, I am spending less money on tying flies and buying flies. So that has been a big pro as well. But what exactly does this look like? Okay. In theory, it sounds nice. Well, don't take as many flies with you to the water. But then we go back to that anxiety over not having enough flies and feeling like, oh crap, I'm not going to catch anything today. And that's a legitimate fear. And I think if you get in your head about it, it can affect and impact the way that you fish. So what this looks like for me is I focus a lot less on having patterns that are specific for a tailwater or specific for a spring creek. And instead, I just want tried and true classic representations of our major aquatic insects, our caddis, our midges, our mayflies, and our stoneflies. And that's really what I try to focus on in stocking and creating these boxes. So, And if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say caddis and midges and mayflies and stoneflies, we've actually got an entire field guide. It's a physical book that completely waterproof, spiral bound. It fits in your fishing pack. It's got all this stuff about these aquatic insects in it. So you can take a look at them and remember, oh yeah, this is what a caddis looks like. This is what a midge looks like. And the best part about this field guide, completely free. You just have to pay the shipping to get it to you. We want you to have this info when you're out there on the water so you can have a better day. So if you want to grab a copy of that, there's a link to do that in the show notes or right here on the screen if you're watching the video podcast. And again, completely free. You just pay the shipping to get it to your house. So we know this is what I'm trying to do. So my current setup of fly boxes, what mine currently looks like, is I've got a box of dry flies in a merger, so it's a two-sided box. And then I've got a box of foam flies and bigger hackled flies where I don't want the hackle to get crushed, and that's in a little compartment box. And then I've got a box of large nymphs and then a box of small nymphs. So 4 boxes total. That is all I carry with me out on the water. Unless I'm spending a day out on the lake, then I've got a separate box of streamers, leeches, and chironomids. But I don't spend as much time on lakes as I do on rivers, so 90% of the time, I'm out there with those 4 boxes. And within all of those boxes, I have a pretty small selection of patterns overall, but I've got a lot of variation in size and color. So that's where my variety really comes in, is I'll have a row of size 12 parachute atoms and a row of size 14s and 16s and 18s and 20s. And then within those, I'll have some that are lighter, the lighter atoms, some that are darker, just try to give myself some opportunities to match a little bit of what's going on, but it's still mostly the same pattern. Okay. That way, when I do go fish a spring creek or I go hit a tailwater where the flies tend to be a bit smaller and the fish are definitely much more selective, then I've got flies that are probably the right size and shape. Okay. Because I focus on sizes, and not so much a bajillion different patterns. I want a lot of sizes of the same stuff. I don't have to worry about whether I've got this one pattern that I saw in a fly shop that's marketed as perfect for tailwaters. Okay, I don't need it because I've already got stuff that works for tailwaters because, smaller sizes, different, maybe slightly different colors or whatnot. I've got those in the box. So, and just to drive this point home, okay, about a month ago, I was out on a tailwater that I love to fish, and it's known for really small flies and really picky fish. Like, this place makes Colorado's fish look easy. That's how tough this place can be. And I did tie up a few flies before that trip started, which is kind of rare for me these days. I don't tie as much before trips. I just kind of tie, a couple nights a week and just restock stuff that I lost. But I actually sat down before this trip and tied. And 10 years ago, I would have been Googling really great blue-winged olive emerger patterns and really cool midge patterns. And then again, that was that I wanted that emotional safety net of I've got enough flies, I'm fine. And instead, nope, I'm just backing away, going with the tried and true stuff, the stuff that always works for me. So all I tied were Griffiths nets, Sparkles Done, Matt's midges, and smaller parachute atoms. They're all the stuff that I've got on the regular. I just needed them in smaller sizes than I usually carry. So I tied up those smaller sizes for that trip. Now, I do see the other side of this. I see there's going to be some pushback. So let's look at that for a second. Okay. You got all these fly patterns for sale, and you've got guys like Charlie Craven and Blaine Chocolate and Kelly Gallup, Pat Dorsey, Lance Egan, really, really smart anglers, really accomplished fellas, consistently coming up with new fly patterns, consistently thinking, how do we improve this? How do we make it better? And obviously their patterns work. They're good. I use some of Lance's patterns. I use some of Kelly's patterns all the time. And they wouldn't still be in fly shops and catalogs all over the country if they didn't work, if they weren't effective. And I certainly know from seeing Pat Dorsey's fly boxes on Instagram that, excuse me, sorry, I'm just getting over being sick, so I'm still getting used to talking again. But I know from seeing Pat Dorsey's fly boxes on Instagram that he's got tons of different patterns to match anything and everything possible. And it's really cool. And again, these guys are great guys. They're great anglers. They're leaders in the sport in some ways. So why would I sit here and say, okay, well, their flies are cool and they work, but you don't really need all of the flies that they make? Well, I think the best way to explain it's like this. Okay. There's this old episode of Top Gear. It's the Polar Special. And if you've never seen Top Gear before, it's a car show where three friends, Clarkson, May, and Hammond, they go out and they go on crazy adventures with cars and just try to have fun with cars. And the gist of this special was they were going to race to the North Pole, and Hammond was going to be on a dog sled, and then Clarkson and May were taking a modified, super cool Toyota Hilux, and they were going to race dog sled versus truck to see who could get to the North Pole first. And they came at that two very different approaches to the same problem. Okay, a specialized truck designed for Arctic travel, top of the line tech at the time they filmed this, really nice, everything you could want, and then old school tech with the dog sled. And I do think that May and Clarkson were probably much more comfortable on their trip because they were in the truck and not on the dog sled. But I also think Hammond's experience with the dog sled was pretty stinking cool too. And of course, they all defended each method of travel they took. Hammond said the dog sled was the better way to travel. It was more effective, even though he did lose the race. And then Clarkson and May were saying, no, the truck's obviously superior. But at the end of the day, they accomplished the same goal, traveling across the Arctic. That was the goal. Yes, they wanted to win the race, but traveling efficiently across the Arctic was the goal, and they accomplished that. And even though, Clarkson and May, they won the race, I don't think it was all that fair to begin with, because truck versus dog sled, truck's going to win, okay? But I picked this to be the metaphor here because regardless of whether you would personally take the truck or the dog sled, you're still accomplishing that goal of traveling across the Arctic. That's the goal that you're accomplishing. It's really not so much about getting where you're going, but it's about how you're getting there. And I think it's that same thing with fly fishing to a pretty large degree. And especially with how I approach my boxes, how I stock my flies. I really enjoy forcing myself to use a smaller collection of flies that I love, that I have faith in, that work for me, because I think it's made me a much better angler doing that. I have seen more personal growth for myself doing that than I have during all the years when I bought out every fly bin at Sportsman's Warehouse, and I bought every fly tying book, and I watched every fly tying video on YouTube and tried to tie all these patterns so that I was always ready for everything. I really, now that I don't have that fallback of dozens and dozens of patterns to go to when the fish aren't biting, it's really forced me to focus on presentation and dialing that in before thinking about, okay, is this fly choice wrong? Well, it very well might be, because I've gotten a drag-free drift. I put this fly right where it needs to be. I've made it look as real as possible. Okay, there is a very good chance that I've done everything I can from a presentation standpoint. It is time to switch the fly out. And it's really tempting when you've got all those flies in your box to just switch flies at the first sign of a fish not eating. Just, change fly, do something else. And most of the time, if you're a long-time listener to the show, it's not the fly that's wrong. It's usually the presentation. It's usually something you're doing that's wrong and not the pattern itself. So I guess all this is to say that, yes, I respect the heck out of all the new flies in the market. Got nothing but respect for all the anglers who will put the effort into creating these new flies and coming up with new ideas. It really is fun to see that sort of progress being made in the fly fishing space. But I really try not to get sucked into stocking my box with every cool new pattern that I see. I still try new ones now and then. New to me, I should say, right? I'd never fished a missing link until, 2 years ago or something like that. And now it's a fly that's kind of worked its way into my box because it's just a fun, effective fly. I really enjoy tying them too. So that's the other part. If I like tying it, it'll usually end up in my box. But I really try not to get sucked into every new fly I see, putting that into my box, and instead just getting the most out of the patterns that I use 90% of the time anyways. So that's really my advice out of all this. Be intentional about how you stock your fly box. Base your fly choices on the hatches you see, what's local to you. Your blue-winged olives might look a bit different than mine do out here. And I see that all the time. The ones that I get this far north up in Wyoming, they tend to be slightly different shades, a little bit smaller than the ones that Alex and the rest of VFC gets down in Utah. Just there's variation throughout all of these bugs. So really focus on those variations, focus on those little nuances, stock your box accordingly, but focus on lots of sizes, lots of colors of your flies and less so about tons of different patterns. Okay. Make the effort to get great drifts before you consider changing that fly. I really enjoy this intentional approach to fly fishing, feeling like, okay, I did this, not, oh, well, I just threw a fly out there and got lucky. I think you'll enjoy it as well. And if you want to follow this thought experiment even further, you can actually go take a look at the recent show we did about this, the 10 flies that I would use if I could only pick 10, where we take this idea, we go even a little bit deeper into it. I think it was 2 weeks ago or so. But it was a fun little show to do about, well, if I was forced to pick only 10 flies, these are the ones I would use. So I'll throw a link to that down in the show notes as well. But if you think I'm wrong about this topic, if you want to share your list of go-to flies, what's in your fly box right now, definitely drop a comment and let us know. But that's going to wrap up the open of the show this week. And now it is time to get into the Q&A portion of today's episode. And every week here at Untangled, we spend half the show directly answering questions from listeners and viewers just like yourself. So if you've got a fly fishing question that you would like answered, there's a link to send those in down in the show notes or right here on the screen if you are watching the video podcast. Philip from the Czech Republic has our first question, writes in and says, first of all, I really appreciate all the work you guys put into your YouTube videos. They've helped me a ton. I'm from the Czech Republic and I started fly fishing about a year ago. During that journey, I also wanted to start tying my own flies, so I began tying patterns from your tutorials like the pheasant tail, hare's ear, or the chubby Chernobyl. But for some reason, I couldn't catch absolutely anything on them until I started tying more European-style flies like the orange tag nymph, CDC caddis, and Czech nymphs, and suddenly I started catching fish. Is there a reason why this is happening? Thanks. Philip, thanks for the note, man, and you might be the first to send something in from the Czech Republic. I'm not sure, but I think you might be the first. So it's really, really cool to see the global reach of Untangled as we assert our dominance on global fly fishing. No, it's great. I love to hear that you got into tying flies too. It's a lot of fun. It's much more addicting than you anticipate or realize getting into it, and then your whole life's lost, and you start looking at roadkill differently. Like, oh, that's a good patch of deer. I think I could use that. Or, oh, is that a dead pheasant? Wait, honey, pull over. I need the pheasant tails. Of course, I'm not speaking from personal experience at all. I never would do anything like that. My first thought about your question is that due to the nature of the Euro or the Czech nymphs, a lot of them are tied on jig hooks. They use oversized beads, and they'll often be tied with some extra heavy lead-free wire underneath the fly as well. So they're inherently heavier than a lot of the classic Western-style flies that we tie out here, and even East Coast-style flies as well. I think they're just a little bit heavier than what we tie out in this region of the world. So I think they're going to, because they're sinking faster than traditional nymphs, they're probably getting down to that strike zone a lot more quickly, and they're staying there longer. So that's probably why you're seeing some more success with those. Just they're getting down to where the fish are quicker, and they're staying in that strike zone a little bit longer. And I know that over in Slovenia, at least, there's one river Alex fished it a couple of years ago when he and his wife were there for her birthday trip. He couldn't use split shot at all on his line to get his nymphs down, so he just had to use a really big heavy nymph. So there is a lot of that design philosophy going into nymphs all throughout the region, I believe. I'm not sure where you can and can't use split shot, but I know that's not a one-off regulation for Slovenia. I know that does happen elsewhere. I don't know if that happens in the Czech Republic, but it is always good to just fish heavy flies instead of split shot anyways, because you get a lot more feel and feedback from the heavy flies. The split shot can be, they can really mess with the drift sometimes if you don't rig it up correctly. So my 2 cents, just tie with tungsten beads if you can. Add some of that extra lead-free wire underneath the body of the fly as well. Get those flies heavy so that they sink down and stay where the fish are hanging out. Now, as for the dry flies, it worked better because you mentioned that chubby Chernobyl and then the CDC caddis. The chubby didn't work, but the CDC caddis did. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but my guess is the chubby Chernobyl just doesn't imitate much of anything on your local river, or at least maybe not at the time you were using it. It's a really good terrestrial imitation. So your grasshoppers, it's a great grasshopper imitation. There's even a lot of chubby derived stonefly imitations as well. But again, I don't know really much at all about the rivers in the Czech Republic. So I don't know what your stonefly situation's like. It's just very possible that it wasn't imitating anything that the fish were currently eating when you were using the chubby out there on the water. But you did say that the CDC caddis caught you some fish on a dry fly. I don't think I would consider the CDC caddis a Euro-style dry fly at all, but I think the reason the caddis worked for you is that caddis flies, they are one of the most abundant aquatic insects in the whole world. There's almost more of them than there are clips of me saying that I love wings in Untangled. So they really are. They're in almost every trout stream in the world. So it's really not a surprise to me that the caddis dry fly worked for you, because they're just a great go-to. They're so prevalent everywhere. Fish are used, or trout, pardon me, are used to seeing caddis flies. So but I would think that's why that worked. And really, this just ties back into what we were talking about a few minutes ago, right? Mimic those main groups of aquatic insects, the big four, and you're going to be fine. So hopefully that answers your question. Appreciate you sending it in. Thanks. Corey from Utah has our next question, writes in and says, "Good day, gents. I have only been fly fishing for about 6 months. Spring and summer are coming about, and I hear of the term wet wading. My question is, what are the right type of shoes and socks to be worn? Do I still wear my wading boots and something with them, or am I rocking a pair of strapped sandals? Any insight would be helpful. Thanks." Corey, do we have the absolute right help for you? We actually did an entire video last year about wet wading and getting all set up and geared up for that. I'll link that in the show notes for you and anyone else who wants to give that wet wading video a look. But honestly, you can wear whatever you want. A lot of folks in the comments of that video and feedback we got from it said, yeah, I just wear Crocs and shorts and I'm wet wading and that's all I need. I kind of doubt the Crocs part, because Crocs have holes in them and sand and rocks and dirt go through the holes. And then you're standing on that in your bare feet, and that's just not comfortable all day long. So unless they're just wading a river that's a perfect marble bottom, which if you have that, please let me know. I'd love to come see it. It's going to be uncomfortable to do that all day long. So what Alex and I like to do, whatever the whole team here at VFC likes to do as well, is just grab a pair of quick dry wading pants, and then the same wading boots that I wear with my waders, and then a pair of neoprene wading socks. And I like this setup because I prefer pants over shorts, because my legs are just so great that if I ever unleashed them on the world in shorts, I don't think y'all could handle that. No, I like it because the pants protect my legs a little bit more from getting beat up and chewed up as we're bushwhacking, walking to the river. Does help keep some of the ticks and other wonderful little critters out there off me as well. I really appreciate that part of the wading pants. And then my personal favorite are the back eddy pants from Squala. They're amazing. They are so comfortable. They're quick drying. They're durable as heck. I haven't put a hole in them yet. I really can't recommend those ones highly enough. They're so stinking good. I'll actually throw a link to those in the show notes if you guys want to go check out a pair of the back eddy wading pants. You need like one pair and you're set for life. They're so good. But those are the pants I like. The wading boots that I wear are actually the same ones that I wear with my waders, like I mentioned. I like going with wading boots while wet wading instead of sandals or Crocs because wading boots, they still give you a lot of stability and a lot of traction in the water. They're designed to be in the river. They're designed to be used doing all of that. So it doesn't make sense to get rid of them and go to something that's not designed for it. I still want to be able to use my wading boots because I want the stability, I want the traction, I want the comfort I get out of those boots that you don't necessarily get from sandals or Crocs or whatever else it is. Now, if you like doing it and other stuff, that's fine. I'm just telling you, this is what I like to do. This is what I would personally recommend is going to give you the most enjoyable experience. That'd be keeping your wading boots that you use with your waders for your wet wading. Okay. And again, Squala boots as well for me here. I like their RS boots, but whatever boots you use with your waders are going to be just fine. You don't need a separate pair of boots just for wet wading. And then the neoprene wet wading socks that I mentioned. I wouldn't say these are like an absolute must-have. You could use any like thicker pair of wool sock, but the nice thing about the neoprene wet wading socks is they have a gravel guard built into them. So that's going to keep all the dirt, all the rocks, all the sticks, all the leeches, whatever else it is from getting into your boots. And then you're standing on that and it's uncomfortable and it doesn't feel right. Keeps all of that stuff out of your boots so that you're just more comfortable all day long. And then wading boots are also designed to accommodate the neoprene stocking foot of your waders. So if you just go in there with like a thin pair of socks or whatever, they might be a little too roomy. You might not be able to get them tight enough to be secure in your boots. That neoprene sock actually takes up a lot of that extra room, so it fits just like it does when you're wearing your waders. It's just a really effective way to get the fit dialed in. And to utilize your wading boots to their full extent. And then again, of course, not getting all the rocks and junk that you're standing on. So that is our personal recommendation. That's what we like to do for a wet wading setup. But whether you use shorts instead of pants or whatever you choose to do, you're going to be fine. This is what we like to do and the why behind it. And then we also have the wet wading guide. As well, this little PDF. I will link that in the show notes and somewhere on the screen as well. If you're watching the video podcast, there's a bunch more information about wet wading in this handy little guide. But hopefully that answers your question. Appreciate it a bunch. Thanks. Aaron from Utah has our next question, writes in and says, Spencer, at the risk of sounding foolish, I have a casting question. When fishing with dries, what do you want to land first? The dry fly or the fly line and leader? I've recently started to have success with dry flies on small streams. My best catches have happened when I hold back the fly line just enough to let the dry fly land first and hopefully let the leader and fly line follow as subtly as possible. I've just assumed that this is the right approach, but it occurred to me recently that I've never asked. Side note, last fall I was ready to quit. After 3 years, I was regularly getting tangled and skunked. I wrote in and you recommended that I keep getting back on the water and recording notes from my failures and successes. I'm grateful that I did. I've had some of my most memorable outings since then. I'm not sure I'll ever be a great angler, but some good experiences are making me feel competent at least. Thanks for the knowledge. Aaron, it's a great question, and dude, I'm stoked to hear that you kept going. That's awesome. A way to push through those days. I know how tough they are. I still have them a lot myself. It's not just you, I promise. So really, just tip the hat to you that you pushed through and that that advice worked for you as well. I'm really happy to hear that you got something out of that. So to answer your question, short answer is I don't think it matters all that much. Now, there's all sorts of debate in fly fishing forums, Facebook groups. I found a ton of articles on the subject that argue one way or the other, but here's my 2 cents. And again, take it for what it's worth, but when you're casting dry flies, what is the heaviest part of that setup? Your line, your leader, or your fly? Well, the fly line by far, it's got the most weight, it's got the most mass. And because of gravity, we know that heavier things fall more quickly than lighter things, at least here on Earth. So I would think that a lot of the time your fly line's going to fall in the water before your fly, just because of how this whole gravity thing tends to work out in our favor. The key is a lot more about where your fly lands and then how the fly lands on the water. I think that's what I would concern myself with more. Because you mentioned that your best dry fly catches are when you hold the line back a little bit and the dry fly hits the water first. And what I think you're describing here, if I understand you correctly, is you're making that final cast and all of that slack line shoots out of your guides and it goes out. You don't have any more slack line and it kind of makes that little jump or like pop stop at the end of the cast. And it comes back towards you a little bit and then it falls on the water and it's got all this nice slack in it. And that's actually what you want. That's actually an ideal presentation because you want enough slack in that line. You don't want a completely tight line between you and the dry fly because any little variance in current at that point is going to cause drag. But if you've got some slack, if you've got some little S curves in the line and the leader, that's going to give you some room for the fly to just move and drift naturally with the current versus a very tight straight line to the fly where if you're pulling it back to you, you might end up causing some drag because you're trying to keep that perfectly straight tight line to the dry fly. You don't need that with a dry fly. So that really is what you want. It really is going to be the most ideal setup. And then in that case, your fly line's still probably hitting the water first. So I would just make sure that that's what's happening, is that you're getting a good looking drift, that you're getting that you're getting your flies where they need to be. And then make sure that you're not putting your line and your leader on top of rising fish because that will spook them down. That's what we call lining a fish. And that's just the simplest way to get them to quit eating is to land fly line right on top of them. So if you can, try and angle it so that your fly line doesn't land on top of the rising fish, but that it kind of lands, maybe behind and to the side of them a little bit. That'll be helpful as well. So again, my 2 cents, focus on making a cast that lands with a little bit of slack in it for a great drag-free drift and land the fly so that it leads the fish just a little bit. Okay, don't land your fly line and leader on other rising trout, and I think you're going to be in business at that point. So really great question though, and don't sound foolish. Like that's something that one of these things that you don't really think about till you think about it, right? So there's nothing to be embarrassed about there at all. But really great question. Appreciate it. And that wraps up the Q&A portion of the show this week. But it is now time for the Live Real Life moment. And every week here on Untangled, we end the show by sharing a story and a picture from someone out in the VFC audience who is living a real life. We love to hear about what y'all are up to. So if you've got a Live Real Life moment that you would like to share, there's a link to do that down in the show notes or right here on the screen if you're watching the video podcast. And this week's Live Real Life moment is from John, who writes in and says, I'm 14 and still pretty new to fly fishing, but I've already learned so much from all of you. I recently took my first trip. I started the day using a triple nymph rig, but it was a tough morning. The water was high and a bit off color from recent rain, so I decided to switch things up and tied on a San Juan worm. While working a section of riffles, I spotted a solid trout holding upstream. I made a few casts, and to my surprise and excitement, I hooked into and landed my very first brown trout. It was an unforgettable moment. Huge thanks to the podcast and everyone who shares their knowledge. I couldn't have done it without you. John, that's awesome, man. Tip of the cap to you, especially getting out there at a young age and doing it. I love it. That is so sneaking awesome. Really, really fun little story. And if you want to hear more stories like this, if you want to share stories with a whole bunch of other anglers who are going to be able to give you some feedback as well, we've actually got our free school group. It's like Facebook, but it doesn't suck. Just a little online group that we run. There's a link to join that down in the show notes as well. And we see stories like John's all the time in there. So it's a fun place to go hang out. But that does it for this week's episode of Untangled, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate y'all taking the time to listen and watch to the end of the show. If you want to help us out even more, make sure that you're telling everybody you know about Untangled. Preach that good word out there as much as you can. And please rate and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to it as well. That helps us out a bunch. And until next week, everybody, get out on the water, enjoy yourselves, and live real life.